So we're glad to say Salam Alaikum, and to say that we're very pleased to have you here at Villanova, particularly because we have such a history with Oman. It is now 16 years since we have had students, at least about 20 a year, come for their bachelor's degrees, and then some come back for their master's, and Hillel is now a doctoral student. So our association with the Ministry of Health and with the people in Oman has been long and strong, and we hope very much that it will continue for a long time. So welcome, and I'm so glad that you are able to be with us. And Dr. Caputo is going to introduce our guest, and I hope you enjoy him and enjoy the afternoon here with us. Thanks.
Hi, I welcome you on behalf of the College of Nursing and the Center for Arabic and Islamic Studies, of which I am a member of neither. But that never stops philosophers from presiding over any occasion. So. It's a great personal pleasure for me to welcome Abdulrahman al-Salimi to Villanova. He is, as you will shortly find, a very learned and genial man, and someone who knows a great deal about the region and who does very, very important work, I think, on behalf of all of us in the Ministry of Religious Affairs and Endowments in the Sultanate of Oman. He's an officer in that ministry, and their work is dedicated to tolerance, to the name of the journal of which Abdulrahman is the editor. Al-Tasamoh? Not bad. I've been correcting his English, and he's been correcting his Arabic. I think his English is doing better than my Arabic. To tolerance, that's the mission of the journal of which he's the editor, and the mission of the ministry in which he works. And the nation, the Sultanate of Oman, is really a lovely and beautiful place to visit, and it's a place that really every Westerner should see, because it's really a model of how an international community and an Islamic nation and people of all religions and nationalities can meet together and be together and flourish. Dr. al-Salimi is at the moment in one of the most prestigious places in the United States of America. He's a fellow at the Institute of Advanced Studies, and on the way to pick him up today, I drove down Einstein Drive, and we also took a little ride by Einstein's house. So it's and we had lunch with a very distinguished Islamic scholar who works in the same field as Dr. al-Salimi. Dr. al-Salimi is a specialist in the study of ancient Arabic manuscripts. It's a very difficult script to read, and it's, of course, all the tedious and careful work of the reconstruction and reconstitution of original manuscripts. He has a bachelor's degree from the Institute of Sharia Studies in Moscow, a PhD from Durham University in the UK, and he's worked in the ministry since 1992 and has been editor of the journal Tolerance, since 2001. He's the editor of several books, editor and author of several books: Modern Oman in 2006, Islamic Art in Oman 2008, Early Ibadi Literature 2010, Omani Quranic Manuscripts, which he co-edited in 2011, and is the forthcoming editor of Omani Documents in Portuguese. So he's a very distinguished scholar, a very lovely man, and someone whose talk today you will find most interesting. It's entitled The Future of Muslim-Christian Relationships in the Middle East. Abdulrahman, welcome.
I would like to first to thank you, Louise, for this lovely invitation, and also to Jack for this introduction. And thank all of you for your coming, and which that is when I introduce my speech today about Muslim and Christian and the future of the Middle East would be get a good lesson from you. Relation between Muslim and Christian reached a crisis point with bombing of a church in Baghdad at the end of October 2010, which claimed the lives of more than 60 people. This was followed a month later by bombing of the al-Qaddisin, the Senate, a church in Alexandria. It is significant that this bloody event took place in the wake of the Vatican Synod held from 15th to 25th October 2010 to look in the future of the Christian Middle East, where the bombing of a church in Iraq and Egypt evidence that elements are active among radical Islamists and authorities alike, who hope to deliver the message that there is no future for Christian in the Levant, and that it is Arab Muslims who are particularly responsible for displacement of Christians. The total Christian population of Arab East, always called Mashriq or the Oriental, I can't say the Mashriq because I will repeat it, continue, because this is quite well known in the Arab Mashriq, is about 20 million, of whom 20 million are in Egypt, 10 million Copts, and 2 million Catholics, Protestant, and Latin, and Roman Orthodox. With the rest, 8 million distributed through Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Iraq. These are the Orthodox, Syriac, and Aramaic communities affiliated to Vatican, and a small group of a Protestant and also Roman Catholic Latin congregation. As such, the major Christian groups are Copts, Orthodox, then Roman Catholics, followed by the Syriac communities, which are, for the most part, affiliated to the Vatican. Most notable among these latter are the Maronites in Lebanon. There are hundreds of thousands of Armenian Orthodox and Armenian Catholic in Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan, the majority of which are of Turkish origin and arrived in the Arab Mashriq countries in aftermath of the First World War. As long as we are addressing the size of the Christian population in the Arab Mashriq, or the Arab and Oriental, we may say all mention of the few million, 5-6 million Christian who originated in that region and who today lives as immigrants in the United States, Canada, Brazil, and Australia. These Christian exodus have continued for more than a century. Many of the migrants still maintain links with their relatives and the countries from which they immigrated, especially those who left in the mid-last century, mostly from Lebanon and Egypt and Palestinian and Syria and Iraq. The above example of Armenian, most of whom came after the First World War, means that Arab countries were still attractive to Christian and even Jews up until 1930s and 1940s. There are rogue statistics that demonstrate that at the beginning of the 20th century, Christian in the Arab Mashriq represented up to 20% of population. Today, however, let us say in the statistic in 2009, Christian of various persuasion constitute no more than 10% of regional population, and migration is rough in their ranks. In Iraq and Palestinian Christian communities have almost disappeared. In 2000, Iraq had over 1 million Christian out of total population of 22 millions. But today, the most optimistic estimate place the total at no more than half of that. The figure of Palestinians in 1984, the year Israel was established, was about 1 million out of 4 million Palestinians. Today, the numbers are down of around half a million out of 4 million resident Palestinians. The Palestinian situation is, as everyone knows, a special case because half of Palestinian people left for exile or were displaced between 1948 and 1967, and no distinction was made in this between Muslim and Christian. However, we see that the situation is more serious when we find that the mass immigrants affecting Iraq since the 2003 occupation also extend to Lebanon and Syria. A Christian made almost 51% of the Lebanese population in 1931, but today no more than 40% at best. 50 years ago, Syria had more than 20 million, Syria has more than 2 million Christians. Today the number has dropped to around 1.5 million. While it may be said that growth in Muslim birth rate has exceeded that for Christian, especially in urban areas, there has been migration among Muslims during the past 4 decades too. Nevertheless, migration among Christians in the Arab Mashriq remains higher. Before the violence events against Christians and their churches in Iraq and Egypt, there had been no persecution or challenge to religious freedom or to beliefs and freedom of a Christian in the Arab Mashriq. Yet immigration has been constant to pervasive, especially over the past 5 decades. In this regard, research ventures a number of reasons which may be summarized as follows. Firstly, erosion of the historic rule of a Christian. Christianity in the Mashriq, or as mentioned, always the Mashriq is mean Arab in the East, has deep roots, as we'll know, with its origin going back to the time of Jesus and his displaced, especially in Palestinian, Egypt, Iraq, Anatolia, and Asia Minor. Impacted by emergence of Islam, by eclipse, and then demise of Byzantine control. It returned to flourish from 18th century onwards as a result of Christian links with the Western Europe. We know that these links brought with them benefits and drawbacks. Among the negative aspects was rivalry sustained by Eastern Christians from both Catholics and Protestants. Missionaries were dispatched from Europe and America competing for guidance of indigenous Christian towards the true religion. As a result, Roman Catholicism separated from the Roman Orthodox Church. Most of the Syriac Church were also absorbed into Catholic rite, and evangelical church separated throughout the Oriental as a result of Eastern Christian converting to or other of Protestant. As a result of Eastern Christian converting to one or other of the Protestant missionary persecution, this led the escalating atmosphere to discord and division among Eastern Christians. Meanwhile, the Jesuits founded the University of St. Joseph in Beirut. As just American missionary had found the American University in the same city a century and a half before. These two universities influence and propagation of modern scientific ideas in the Levant and graduate thousands of students who further sealed the connection with Renaissance Europe. As such, the Mashriq Christians propagated by this advance became pioneers in the educational movement in the Arab world. They were two pioneers in the dissemination of patriotic and nationalist ideas and the call of the establishment of modern state based on European template. Such cultural and scientific strides, a combined trade exchange, migration, and deepening relation between East and West. Many regard Lebanese and Palestinian Christians as foreigners in these trends and exchanges. This intellectual, cultural, and political preeminence was prone to erosion and retreat in all countries of the Arab Levant. In part, of course, this came from the fact that Muslims also embraced education and progressed and extended their connection, so their rule was no longer the sole preserve of Christians. But there was another aspect in that enlightenment of Christian elite came from a sense that they were carrying a message, that they had communicating vocation, and that they were a bridge between East and West. So long as the elite traveled to Western Europe and America and found success there, they didn't consider returning for two reasons. First, the pressure bearing down of the Christian, and the second, a global condition, ordinary. Ordinary Christians found themselves without leadership and without the significant rule to which their ancestors had become accustomed. This matter, a lack of belief in the importance of their presence and influence, affected in the moral of Christians and their resistance to pressure, and their stability and their ability to hang on, do not immigrate. We may say that these things are not tangible or easy to assist in. Concrete terms, and that it's the true, but it's become clear over the extended period we are talking about. Secondly, an even level of enlightenment among Muslims. The two trends took hold among Muslims in the middle of last century. The endeavors to integrate into respectable and influential middle class and the emergence of Islamic revivalism. The first did not interest with the Christian communities, but rather generated a rivalry with them to their rules in the trade and economic cultural spheres. The second, revivalists produced a special awareness of importance of religions and ritual, of self-identity, and its specific attributes. Cultural identification does not have to lead to violence, but it can encourage exclusion and backwardness. And the Christians were viewed as other. It is, if this trend were intensified, the Christian Arab could come to be considered mutagharrib or westernized, or advocate of the West anti-Islamic ideas. As such, in the era of Islamic revival, Christian links with the West, which had been a feature of an earlier period, could be seen as a ground of accusation as to defect deserving of deviation of avoidance. An example of a change in the constitutions of Muslim and mid-20th century in the fact that among revivalists were those who despised the notion of nationalism and held the Christian responsible for importing these concepts from Europe, where a Christian might have said that the purpose behind the nationalist idea was to get closer or to Muslims, so to be together in one nation or as one people. The revivalists contended that it was better to behave as a Muslim and a Christian in the way they had lived together of tens of centuries. However, the radical were reluctant to address citizenship, that is to say, equality between Christian and Muslim is right and obligation. Rather, they were anxious to remind the later of day of Ahl al-Dhimma, non-Muslim protected under Muslim rule by payment of capital tax, and to governors such as such. And of course, the Christian did not accept this. Thirdly, the political situation and ruling regime. Since the 1950s, both Middle East and North African region and Arab world have been characterized by prevalence of military regime that came to power by the way of dictator. Gradually, these regimes eliminated all trace and participation and marginalized all social political categories. Among these marginalized were, of course, Christian. Indeed, they suffered more than rest because of prominent roles they had played during the colonial era and the initial era of independence. The pressure exercised by military regimes was not confined to issues of liberty, the media and political life, but also to economic aspect and lifestyle. So, assets were nationalized and the economic socialized. The future, forcing the families of many Christians to leave Egypt, Iraq, and Syria for Lebanon, Europe, and United States in search employment freedom and education of their children. As this regime took for the long haul and the pressures on society extend all communities, Muslim and Christian, divisions separate, and clinicalized relation emerged between the regimes and Christian minorities, or some their elites. This somewhat reduced the construction and immigration, but increased suspicion about the Christian among certain victim categories of Muslims. On broad scale, we could say that for over 5 decades, the ruling regime in the Arab world were, in their practice, a major cause of division with the communities of the deteriorating circumstance of a Christian and the issues that promoted them to immigrate. Fourthly, Israeli-Palestinian conflict and international policies. The report of Synod on Eastern Christians devote a separate section to address the impact of the foundation of the Israeli state and Palestinian in the migration of a Christian. The truth is, their freedom and places of worship came under same pressure as that affecting the religious freedom of Muslims. However, the foundation of the Jewish state was accompanied by a number of other matters, including the displacement of more than half of the Palestinian people, so the newcomers could take their place, and among these departing were Muslim and Christian. The other issues was dissemination of war and instability throughout the region from 1950s to the 1990s. All this derived from the turmoil and occupation that resulted from appearance of the new entity in the region. It affected both Muslim and Christian, although the Christian, who were in the minority, were more adversely affected by the disturbance to security and political life. However, Christians faced major pressure as a result of Western and U.S. policies in the region, such as the war in Iraq and Sudan. The unrest that occasionally surfaced encouraged acts of violence, which poured down on the Christian and propelled them to leave. Then widespread U.S. violence fanned the flames of Islamic fundamentalism and frustrated opposition to American and Christian alike. The Synod on Eastern Christian issued 44 recommendations, all related to diagnosis and understanding of their situation, and how the Christian might face the challenge and dangers, as well as expectation of the future. The recommendation allude in one form or another to the 4 reasons mentioned, then call on Christian to resist the pressure to refrain from immigration and to renew and develop communication with Muslims in every way. The recommendation does not skirt the issues of Israel, but they do avoid insofar as possible the 2 other principal issues, the ruling regime and international policies. The foreign policies of the United States after the end of Cold War has indeed encouraged violence, and it failed to do enough solve the Palestinian-Israeli problem, and supported the incumbent regimes out the fear of Islamic fundamentalism. The disaster effect on the Christian of these 2 principal issues was clear. The Palestinian and conflict including the east of Jerusalem, drove out virtually every Christian there, just as the American occupation of Iraq has virtually eliminated Iraq's ancient Christian communities. But the ruling regime go on forever and are everywhere enriching through the Arab world from Middle East and North Africa. And so, 3 factors will determine whether Christian and Muslim have any hope of viewing a different horizon in the future. Well, I can suggest there are 3 elements: a change in international policy toward the region and toward also the conflict Israeli-Palestinian problem. The second, Arab democratic change, and the third, Arab-Muslim cultural change. We must hope that American policy in the era of President Obama, insofar as it endeavors to prevent the outbreak of new wars, and insofar as it attempts to solve the Palestinian problem, and assuming it continue without wavering, can result in calming of the atmosphere that will create a climate for communication and openness in initiation of force and the threat of force. However, the wide open door to change the relationship between Muslim and Christian in terms of granting citizenship, rights, guarantees, and coexistence is the door to Arab democratic change, the floodgates of which have opened in Egypt and Tunisia. As doubtless we will other states and other countries. In this democratic climate, Muslim and Christian will both take part as a citizen, enjoy basic freedom, forging their present and their future by using their minds, vote, and free choice. Arab and foreign preserve feared to take over by Islamists and of the democratic uprising, but what has happened so far does not support these fears. My own belief is that there has been correlation between the intensity and dictatorship and tyranny on the one hand and the rise of fundamentalism on the other. And these extremes will depart together as they surface together as action and reaction. That said, it doesn't relate as a Muslim and a Christian intellectual from our knowledge and of need for review of cultural awareness and cultural identity, and how we might work by way of a criticism and compromise toward liberalization and renewal and reform. As St. Paul says, so that we may have a life and better life. Thank you.